There are crossroads in life where the air is thick with uncertainty, where one step forward could lead to destiny fulfilled or dreams undone. We stand at the threshold of decisions that shape the very fabric of our existence. Where to go, whom to love, what to fight for, and when to walk away. These choices are not light, nor are they accidental. They carry the weight of our past, the trembling hope of our future. And in those moments, when the road bends and the path is hidden in shadow, we do not walk alone. For there is a whisper, sometimes so faint it is almost missed, other times a roaring call that shakes the soul. It is a guidance that does not falter, a wisdom that does not wane. It is the voice that leads us when we cannot see, the nudge that pulls us back from danger, the comfort that steadies a weary heart. In the making of great decisions, when fear rises and doubt gnaws, there is a hand that reaches out, unseen but certain, unshakable in its knowing. The night was thick with silence, and the stars stood still, as though even they waited for an answer. A soul sat restless, a heart weighed heavy with the burden of choice. Should they go forward into the unknown or remain within the walls of familiarity? Should they step boldly into the wild uncertainty, or should they cling to what is known, what is safe? These questions do not come dressed in ease. They are not wrapped in soft linens of certainty. No, they come like a storm, rattling the windows of our comfort, howling through the chambers of our doubt. And yet in the stillness of that night, there was something else, a quiet stirring, an unshaken presence. It did not force, did not shout, did not press its will like the world so often does. Instead, it waited, patient and steady, like an anchor in restless waters. A voice not heard by the ears, but known by the soul. A pull not of force, but of love. We have all been there, standing at the crossroads of life, feeling the weight of a decision too great to carry alone. The world offers its advice in a chorus of contradictions. Follow your heart, they say, though the heart is fickle. Do what makes you happy, they say, though happiness is fleeting. Choose the easy road, they whisper. But there is a wisdom beyond our own, a voice that does not change with the seasons, does not shift with the tides. It is the voice that calls, not to fleeting pleasure, but to lasting purpose. The voice that speaks not of momentary ease, but of eternal truth. And when the crossroads come, when the burden of choice threatens to break us, that voice does not abandon, does not falter. It leads, not with force, but with certainty. There was a woman who stood at such a crossroads, her heart heavy with the weight of a choice she did not know how to make. She had built a life of comfort, yet something within her whispered that she was made for more. She had security, yet something stirred in her soul, calling her to step into the unknown. The voices around her said, "Stay where it is safe." But something deeper, something stronger said, "Go where you are led." And so she wrestled, as we all do. She weighed the risks, counted the costs, questioned the wisdom of leaving behind all that was familiar. But in the stillness of that night, she did not rely on the shallow wisdom of the world. No, she sought guidance from a place beyond herself. She did not ask for an easy road, but for the right one. She did not ask for certainty, but for clarity. And when she opened her heart, when she quieted the noise, the answer came. Not in flashing signs or grand declarations, but in peace, in the deep, unshakable knowing that she was not alone in her choice. And so she stepped forward, not without fear, but with faith, not without questions, but with trust. And in that step, the path unfolded before her. Not all at once, not in its entirety, but enough to move forward, enough to keep going, enough to trust that each step taken in obedience would lead to a place greater than she could have imagined. We have all faced these moments when the road ahead is unclear, when the decision before us feels too great to bear. And in those moments, it is easy to be consumed by fear, to be paralyzed by doubt. But fear is a thief, and doubt is a liar. They will tell you that you are alone, that you must figure it out by yourself, that if you take the wrong step, all will be lost. But that is not the truth. For there is a way that is higher than our own, a wisdom greater than our own understanding. And when we seek that wisdom, when we quiet our restless hearts and listen, we will find that we are not abandoned in our decisions. We are guided, we are led, and though the road may not always be easy, though the way may not always be clear, there is a certainty that carries us forward. A young man once stood at such a crossroads, torn between the life he had built and the life he was called to. The world told him to choose ambition, to chase after success at any cost, but something within him told him that success without purpose is empty, that gain without guidance is loss. And so he sought not the wisdom of men, but the wisdom that does not waver. He did not ask for riches, but for direction. He did not ask for power, but for purpose. And when the answer came, it was not in the way he expected, but it was unmistakable. It is in these moments, when the choice before us feels too great, that we must remember we were never meant to make these decisions alone. We were never meant to carry this weight by ourselves. And when we seek guidance, when we listen beyond the noise of the world, we will find that we are not without direction. We may not always understand the road ahead. We may not always see the full picture, but if we trust, if we listen, if we step forward not with fear but with faith, we will find that the path is already laid before us, not in its entirety, but enough to take the next step, enough to move forward, enough to know that we are never alone in the making of great decisions. The weight of choice is a heavy thing. It presses upon the heart, filling the mind with questions that swirl like restless winds. What if I choose wrong? What if the path I take leads not to joy but to sorrow? What if I step forward only to find myself lost, wandering in a wilderness of regret? These fears are not foreign to any soul. They have visited the great and the lowly, the wise and the simple, the strong and the weary. They creep in when the moment of decision draws near, whispering their warnings, casting their shadows. And yet there is something greater than fear, something stronger than doubt. It is the quiet certainty that when we ask for guidance, it will be given. Not always in the way we expect, not always in the way we desire, but always in the way we need. There is a direction that does not falter, a wisdom that does not err. And when we trust in that wisdom, when we lean not on our own understanding, but on something far greater, we find that even the heaviest choices become bearable. A woman once stood on the edge of a decision that would alter the course of her life. She had spent years building something that the world called success, yet her soul felt empty, her heart restless. An opportunity had come, one that required her to leave behind everything she had worked for, everything she had known. The people around her spoke with certainty. Some told her to stay, to hold on to what was safe, to cling to what was secure. Others told her to go, to chase after something new, to leave the past behind. But none of their voices could quiet the storm in her heart. So she turned inward. She stepped away from the noise, from the opinions, from the pressures of those around her. She sought not the wisdom of men, but the guidance that does not waver. And in the stillness, the answer came. It did not come in a great revelation, nor in a booming voice from the heavens. It came as a deep, unshakable peace, a knowing that could not be explained, only felt. And in that moment, she understood the path was not hers to carve alone. It had already been set before her. Her task was not to force her way through, but to follow where she was led. There is something beautiful in surrender, something powerful in trusting a wisdom beyond our own. The world teaches us that control is strength, that certainty is found in knowing every step before it is taken, but true certainty is not found in seeing the whole road. It is found in trusting the next step. It is found in knowing that even when the way ahead is unclear, we are not walking blindly. There was once a man who had spent his life making decisions based on logic, reason, and careful calculation. He prided himself on his ability to weigh the risks, to analyze the outcomes, to ensure that every move was the right one. But then came a choice that could not be measured in numbers, could not be weighed on a scale. It was a choice of the heart, a choice of purpose. It was not about what was profitable, but about what was right. And for the first time, reason failed him. Logic could not provide the answer. No amount of calculation could reveal which path he should take. He wrestled with it, trying to force an answer, trying to find clarity where there was only uncertainty. But clarity did not come through his reasoning. It came when he let go, when he stopped trying to control the outcome and instead sought the guidance that does not fail. And when he did, the answer came. Not in the form of certainty about the future, but in the form of peace about the present. The fear that had gripped him loosened its hold. The doubt that had clouded his mind lifted. And though he did not know exactly where the path would lead, he knew which direction to take. How often do we find ourselves clinging to our own understanding, desperate to make sense of the unknown? How often do we hesitate to take a step forward because we cannot see the entire road ahead? But the greatest journeys are not taken with full knowledge of the destination. They are taken with trust in the one who leads. A young woman once stood at the door of opportunity, her heart torn between what was expected of her and what she knew she was called to do. Her family, her friends, the world around her, they all had a plan for her life. They had mapped out her future, decided her fate, and for a time she had followed that path, believing that it was the right one because it was the easiest. But something within her resisted. A quiet, persistent whisper told her that she was made for something different. The choice before her was not simple. To follow her calling meant to disappoint those she loved. It meant to step into uncertainty, to abandon the safety of a path that had already been paved. It meant to risk failure, to risk loneliness, to risk misunderstanding. The weight of it was almost too much to bear. But she did not let the weight crush her. She did not let the fear silence the whisper. Instead, she sought guidance from the only place where true wisdom is found. And when she did, she found that the answer had been there all along. She had known it in her heart, but fear had clouded her vision. And once that fear was lifted, once she surrendered to the path she was meant to walk, she found that the burden of choice was not hers to carry alone. We have all faced these moments. We have all stood at the threshold of great decisions, our hearts trembling with the weight of what is before us. And in those moments, it is easy to feel alone. It is easy to believe that the choice is ours to make in isolation, that if we choose wrong, we will be lost. But that is not the truth, for we do not walk this path alone. We do not bear this burden without help. When we seek guidance, when we quiet our fears and open our hearts, the answers come. Not always in the way we expect, not always in the way we desire, but always in the way we need. And when they do, we find that the road ahead is not as uncertain as we once believed. The choice may still be difficult, the path may still be unknown, but there is a peace that surpasses understanding, a wisdom that does not fail. And when we trust in that wisdom, when we step forward not with fear but with faith, we find that the way has already been prepared. We find that we are not alone. We find that we are led. And in that knowing, in that trusting, we discover something greater than certainty. We discover purpose. We discover peace. We discover that the greatest decisions in life are not made in fear, but in faith. They are not made in isolation, but in guidance. And when we make them with trust, with courage, with the assurance that we are not walking this path alone, we find that even the heaviest choices become light. We find that even the unknown becomes clear. We find that even when we cannot see the whole road, the next step is enough. The weight of a decision is often heavier than the burden of action itself. It is not the step that drains us, but the standing still, the hesitating, the constant back and forth in our minds. The questions do not rest. They rise with the morning sun and settle deep into the night, whispering possibilities, raising doubts, pulling us in 1,000 directions at once. What if this is the wrong choice? What if I am not ready? What if the path I take leads me somewhere I do not wish to go? And yet, even in the midst of that storm, there is something deeper, something constant. It is the quiet assurance that we are not left to wander alone. We do not have to rely on our own limited wisdom, our own fragile understanding. We are not expected to carry the weight of these choices without help. There is a guidance that does not change with the shifting winds, a wisdom that is not swayed by our fears, a knowing that is beyond our own. And when we seek it, when we open ourselves to it, we find that the answers are already within us, not because we have crafted them ourselves, but because they have been placed there, waiting to be uncovered. A young man once stood on the edge of a great decision, a choice that would shape the rest of his life. He had worked hard, built something strong, gained the respect of those around him. And yet, deep in his soul, there was a stirring, a whisper that told him he was meant for something more. But more did not mean easier. More did not mean clearer. More meant leaving behind the security of what he had built. More meant walking into the unknown with nothing but trust to hold on to. He wrestled with it. He prayed for a sign, for something undeniable to show him the way, but no sign came, no grand moment of revelation. Instead, there was only that same quiet whisper, that same deep knowing. The fear did not vanish, but the peace grew stronger. And so, with trembling hands and a steady heart, he took the first step. The road did not unfold before him all at once. He did not see the whole picture, did not receive every answer he wished for, but he found that each step taken in faith led to the next, and the next, and the next, and in the end, he arrived at a place greater than he could have ever planned for himself. So often we wait for certainty before we move. We wait for every detail to be clear, for the fear to disappear, for the risk to dissolve. But that is not how great decisions are made. If we only move when we are certain, we will never move at all. If we only act when we are fearless, we will remain trapped in the same place forever. For certainty is not found in seeing the whole road. It is found in trusting the next step. A woman once stood at the intersection of two lives, the life she had planned and the life she was being called to. She had spent years building her path, believing she knew where she was going. But then, without warning, a new door opened before her, one she had never expected. It called her to something unfamiliar, something that did not align with the plans she had so carefully laid out. She tried to ignore it, tried to reason her way back to the path she had once been so sure of. But no matter how much she tried to turn away, the call remained. It was not forceful, not demanding, but it was persistent. She hesitated, afraid to step into something she could not control. She weighed the risks, analyzed the costs, tried to convince herself that staying where she was would be enough, but the more she resisted, the heavier her heart became. And when she finally let go of the fear, when she finally surrendered to the guidance that had been calling her all along, she found something unexpected. She found peace. Not because she had figured everything out, not because she suddenly had all the answers, but because she was no longer walking in resistance. She was walking in alignment with the path she was meant to take. How many times do we fight against the very thing we are meant for? How many times do we cling to our own plans, refusing to let go, refusing to trust that something greater is waiting on the other side of surrender? We tell ourselves that we must be sure before we move, that we must have a perfect understanding before we act. But that is not the way of wisdom. For wisdom does not always reveal the whole path at once. It does not always give us the final destination before we begin. It calls us forward one step at a time, asking us not for perfect understanding, but for trust. And when we step forward, when we move in faith rather than fear, we find that the road is not as uncertain as we once believed. A man once faced a decision that seemed impossible. He had built his life on logic, on reason, on careful planning. He did not believe in acting without complete certainty, did not trust what could not be measured. But then came a moment that could not be calculated, a choice that could not be solved like an equation. It required something he had never relied on before, faith, and for the first time he realized that his own wisdom was not enough. His own understanding was too small for the decision before him. And so he did something he had never done before. He let go. He released the need for absolute certainty, the need to control every outcome. He sought wisdom beyond his own, and when he did, the answer came. It did not come in the way he expected, did not come through logic or analysis. It came in peace. It came in clarity. It came in the deep knowing that he was not making this decision alone. And when he moved forward, when he stepped into the unknown, he found that the path had already been prepared for him. So many of us stand at the threshold of great decisions, afraid to move, afraid to choose, afraid to step forward without knowing what lies ahead. But fear is a thief. It steals our purpose, our progress, our peace. It tells us that we must figure everything out before we act, that we must see the full picture before we move. But that is not the way of true guidance. True guidance does not always show us the end. It shows us the next step. It does not always remove the fear. It gives us the courage to move forward despite it. A woman once stood at such a crossroads, her heart torn between what she had always known and what she was being called to. The choice before her was not easy. It was not simple. It required sacrifice, required trust, required her to step into something she could not fully understand. And yet, when she sought guidance, when she listened not to the fears but to the quiet whisper within, she knew what she had to do. And so she moved. Not without trembling, not without uncertainty, but with trust. And as she walked forward, the path became clearer. She did not have to see the whole road. She only had to take the next step. And in taking that step, she found that she was not alone. We have all stood in that place of hesitation, of uncertainty, of waiting for a sign that may never come in the way we expect. But the truth is, we do not need to see the whole picture to move forward. We do not need to have every answer before we take the next step. We only need to trust that when we seek guidance, it will be given. And when we step forward in faith, we will find that the path was there all along, waiting for us to walk it. The moment before a decision is made is often the most painful part of the journey. It is the place where fear grips the heart, where uncertainty clouds the mind, where doubt whispers its endless questions. What if I am wrong? What if I regret this choice? What if I take a step and find nothing beneath my feet? It is a place of tension, of waiting, of standing at the edge of something unknown and not yet having the courage to move. But decisions are not made in stillness. They are made in motion. They are made in faith. They are made not in the absence of fear, but in the willingness to walk forward despite it. And when we seek guidance, not from the voices of the world, not from the weight of our own limited understanding, but from a source beyond ourselves, then we find that the road is not as uncertain as we once believed. There was once a man who had lived his whole life making decisions based on what was safe. He did not take risks, did not step beyond the boundaries of what was expected, and because of that, he never failed, but he never truly lived either. He watched others step into the unknown, watched them chase after things that he was too afraid to pursue, and he told himself that they were reckless, that they were foolish, that they were risking too much. But deep inside, he envied them, because while they faced uncertainty, they also tasted the fullness of life in a way he never had. And then came a moment when he was faced with a decision that could not be made by playing it safe. It required him to take a leap, to step into something he could not control. He wrestled with it, trying to convince himself that staying where he was would be enough. But in the quiet of the night, when the noise of the world had faded, he knew the truth. He knew that if he stayed, he would never be satisfied. He knew that if he let fear hold him back, he would spend the rest of his days wondering what could have been. So with trembling hands and an unsteady heart, he took the first step, and the moment he did, something shifted. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. The uncertainty had not vanished, but it no longer paralyzed him, because he knew in that moment that he was not walking alone, he was being led. How many times have we held ourselves back from the life we are meant to live because we are afraid of choosing wrong? How many times have we let the fear of the unknown keep us from stepping into something greater? We tell ourselves that we must have all the answers before we act, that we must be completely sure before we move, but that is not the way of true guidance. A woman once stood before a decision that terrified her. She had spent years building something, investing her time, her energy, her heart, and now she was being asked to walk away from it, to leave behind the familiar, to step into something she did not yet understand. The voices around her told her to stay. They told her that leaving was too risky, that she was being foolish, that she should not walk away from what she had worked so hard for. But the voice within her told her something different. She resisted it at first, afraid of what it would mean, afraid of what others would say, afraid of stepping into something unknown. But the more she tried to ignore it, the more restless she became. The more she fought it, the heavier her heart felt. And then she realized the weight she was carrying was not the weight of the decision itself. It was the weight of resisting what she already knew she had to do. So she let go, she stepped forward, not because she had all the answers, not because she was fearless, but because she trusted the guidance that was leading her. And when she did, she found that the path had already been prepared. She found that the things she thought she was losing were nothing compared to what was waiting for her. She found that the greatest peace does not come from holding on, but from surrendering. So many of us are afraid of making the wrong choice, of stepping into something that will lead to regret. But what if the greatest regret is not in choosing wrong, but in never choosing at all? What if the real failure is not in making a mistake, but in refusing to move out of fear? What if the very thing we are afraid of is the thing we are meant for? A man once had a dream, a vision for his life that was bigger than anything he had ever seen before. It called him to something greater, something beyond what he had ever imagined for himself. But it required him to leave behind everything he knew. It required him to risk everything he had built. It required him to step into the unknown with nothing but trust to hold on to. And he was afraid. He was afraid of failure, afraid of what others would say, afraid of losing what he had worked for. He told himself that he would wait until the fear passed, until he felt ready. But the fear never left. The uncertainty never faded, because fear does not disappear before we act. It only disappears when we do. And so finally, he stopped waiting. He stopped asking for a certainty that would never come. He stopped looking for an easy way forward. And instead, he stepped out in trust. And the moment he did, he realized something. Fear had been nothing more than an illusion, a chain that had no real power except the power he had given it. How often do we give fear more power than it deserves? How often do we allow doubt to keep us from the very thing we are meant to do? We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect assurance that we will not fail. But there is no perfect moment. There is only now. There is only the choice to trust, to move forward, to step into what has already been prepared for us. A woman once faced a decision that she knew would change her life. It was not a small choice, not something she could take lightly. It would affect everything, her future, her family, her dreams. And she was terrified. She wanted to be sure. She wanted a sign, something undeniable to tell her what to do. But no sign came, no voice from the heavens. So she waited, she hesitated, she stayed in place, hoping that if she gave it enough time, the answer would become clear. But the only thing that became clearer was that waiting was not bringing her peace. It was only deepening her fear. And so one day she made a choice, not because she had all the answers, not because she was fearless, but because she refused to let fear decide for her. And when she stepped forward, she found that the guidance she had been seeking had been with her all along, not in some grand revelation, but in the quiet certainty that she was not alone. We all stand at these crossroads. We all face decisions that feel too big for us to make, and in those moments, we can choose to let fear keep us frozen, or we can choose to trust that we are being led. We can choose to wait for absolute certainty, or we can choose to step forward in faith. Because the truth is, the path is already there. The answers are already waiting. The only thing left is for us to take the step. To trust that when we move, we will not fall. To believe that even in the unknown, we are not alone. To know that even when we cannot see the whole road, the next step is enough. The road of life is paved with decisions, some small and others so great they shake the foundation of who we are. Fear tells us to wait, to hesitate, to demand certainty before we move. But life does not wait for us to be ready. The path does not reveal itself in its entirety before the first step is taken. True guidance does not always come as a loud voice or a flashing sign. It often comes as a quiet knowing, a deep peace that does not erase fear, but gives us the courage to move forward despite it. The greatest regrets are not in the choices we make, but in the moments we let pass because we were too afraid to choose. The path is already there, waiting for us to walk it. And when we trust, when we move, we find that we were never alone.